we have a massive problem. The seller forgot that they are moving in three days.
Right here on News Talk 870.
Good morning. This is Lance Kenmore with the Kenmore team, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of the Tri-Cities Real Estate Update. As always, you can contact me, Lance Kenmore, anytime direct on my cell phone at 727-8977 or visit us on the web at kenmoreteam.com. Once again, I always like to thank John for hosting and everybody here at the station for working to make this happen. Mr. John McKay, how you doing over there?
Doing well. We survived another week.
Yes, we're still here.
Yes.
We're all still here. It's a little cooler, a little easier to survive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Everything's been good in your world?
It's still a parallel universe, if you know what I mean.
It is still a parallel
but we're managing.
Universe for sure, and we are managing. And I will tell you, the real estate world is managing very well. We've been clipping along and still kind of bucking the national economy trends and what's happening. It hasn't been really filtering down to real estate. I always like to kind of give a economic stat for what's happening out there and then kind of relate that to what that looks like in real estate. So interesting. I pulled one off of Elliot Eisenberg, the Bow Tie Economist, that he had titled Stalled Spending. And so in another indication of the stalling national economy, credit card purchases were flat in July and are now 10% below their pre-COVID levels. They feel that the flatlining is probably due to rising corona cases and then behavioral changes in the states that are back to imposing shutdowns again. So, I mean, it makes sense. It kind of goes hand in hand. If you can't go to the restaurant, the gas station, the bars, etc., but spending down. So it's really interesting to look at that in relation to real estate. We have not seen that in the real estate sector. It still continues to be very strong and robust, busy market, lots of sales happening, and so it's keeping us employed, and we're happy about that. So it's just a matter of working through those transactions and processing them that we're going to talk a little bit about today. But before we do talk about some of that serious stuff, we always like to look at our crazy celebrity real estate houses. And sometimes the good old-fashioned multi-million-dollar houses are not burning off the market. So Steinbrenner Estate had an estate in Tampa, listed it a year ago for $5.75 million. Him and his wife had built it in 2001. And it wasn't selling. So they went in and just did a $1.3 million price cut. Wow. So they go from 5.75 to 4.4. So I look at it and I flip through the photos, and I got to tell you, maybe he was always so busy with baseball. It looks like he built it in 2001 and never touched the house again. Wow. And so it's amazing what, what are we looking at? 20 some odd years of dating can do. I mean, we're talking blue carpet is in there. Wow. Still. So definitely not my style, and obviously not the style of many in the market. But when a house has been on the market a year, you haven't had the offers, the market hasn't caught up to the pricing, there's probably something that needs to happen there. What they're looking at is potentially a buyer coming in and needing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a large estate. It's one thing when you're redoing the carpet in a 1,300 square foot house. It's different when you're redoing flooring in a 10,000 square foot house.
Well, I guess maybe in hindsight, it's probably good that he didn't paint it in pinstripes like their uniforms.
Yes, it probably also would have a similar problem. So It's kind of funny to see the top end real estate a lot of times has the exact same issues that we're dealing with in a normal market.
Just because your kid grew up in a purple room and they moved out, your daughter, doesn't mean that the next buyer's going to want that.
Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what that ends up selling for there. But on to a more local real estate topic that I wanted to talk about today, and that was the process of moving when you close a house and the problems that can ensue from moving, and especially underestimating what a move looks like. We've had a number of calls. You know, I always take notes throughout the week when I see something that says, "Oh man, that'd be a great topic for the radio show." And when I've heard it like the third or fourth time in the same 2-week period, I'm like, "Okay, boom. Here's our topic for the radio show. Here's what we're dealing for."
Real world, real life stuff.
On top of the fact that I just spent within the last 2 months that I moved our entire real estate office.
Did you see the pictures on Facebook, folks? I saw that.
To a new office. And, you know, as good as we are being in the industry and the profession, there's still some things I messed up. And so I was like, let's talk about that. And then we were helping some friends move, and then we had some clients that had some issues. And so I said, okay, let's talk about what that looks like in closing and what that process is like. So the first thing I do in that situation is I just go right to our contract. And it comes down to, and a lot of times, folks, I got to say, there's still buyers and sellers out there. Please read the contracts that you're signing. So a lot of times, you know, we run into agents on the other side of the transaction, and maybe they haven't thoroughly explained this to their client, or maybe they did explain it to their client and the client forgot about it during the stressful time of moving. And we see that happen a lot. But contractually, what you sign in our purchase and sale agreement spells out very specifically that seller shall deliver keys and garage door remotes to buyer on closing date, and that the seller shall maintain the property in its present condition, normal wear and tear accepted, until the buyer is provided possession. So what that means basically is you're stating that at the time of signing this document, that you will deliver that property to the buyer basically in the same condition that they've seen it at. As is. So 35, 40 days later, when we get to closing, that's what we're going to be looking at. Seller shall also repair or replace any system or appliance, not limited to plumbing, heat, electrical, that becomes inoperative or malfunctions prior to closing, with a system or appliance of at least equal quality. Buyer reserves the right to walk through the property within 5 days of closing to verify this information.
So if the stove goes kaput
after the home inspection, after the buyer has seen it and the stove goes out the last 3 or 4 days, it really sucks for the seller, but they've got to be replacing that with a new stove or one of equal quality of the previous stove.
This is not as is, no warranty.
This is not as is, no warranty. It's and there might be as is, no warranty after the day of closing, because then that responsibility transfers to the buyer. But until closing, that responsibility is on the seller. And I'll tell you what, this time of year in July and August, it's not the stoves that go out, McKay.
It's the air conditioning.
You beat me to it. You're 100% right. It's the AC systems, and we see a lot of that happening. The other thing that happens is, who's kidding who? That last week and a half of moving, you are extremely busy, and you're taking care of packing, and you're loading moving trucks, and you're going through all of these things. And what happens if you're moving out of town, a lot of times you end up, like, say your closing is next Friday, a lot of people will move that weekend before. Mm-hmm. And when you're moving, McKay, and you're leaving town, and the moving truck is out on the front yard, and you're moving stuff in and out of the grass on moving day, what do you think happens?
The lawn gets torn up.
Well, or the sprinklers come on while you're moving. So what do you think you do? You reach over and you turn the sprinkler system off.
Yes.
And then you load up the moving truck, and then you leave town
without turning the sprinklers back on.
And so then what ends up happening is when it's 104 degrees out for 7 days straight and there's no water, buyers show up and do their walkthrough on Thursday because they're signing on Friday. And guess what? The yard's burnt up. It's not in its present condition that it was before. And so, and things might have gotten left. There's stuff that didn't quite fit in the moving truck. So it got left in the front living room, and, my third cousin Sally's going to come pick it up for me. And Sally, being a third cousin that she is, never comes by to get the stuff. So there's all of these things that happen in these situations, but contractually, they're not supposed to happen. So then the buyer has to do that walkthrough. They have the right. They've contractually negotiated for that right to do the walkthrough 5 days before closing. It gives them a chance to get in there, see what's happening, and then they can address those concerns with the seller prior to signing, because their repercussions might be that buyer doesn't sign because you didn't deliver the property in the condition that they had agreed to. So
exactly.
So those type of things happen with the stress of moving. And I've got to tell you, COVID does not make things better. In general, there's stress of moving. Now they have additional stress of what's going on with certain places being closed. Maybe they're not able to order the right supplies that they needed to in time, or the moving companies are facing issues because they're coming from different states with different regulations. So we're just seeing a few hiccups in this process. So I wanted to go over a couple things today to talk about making that moving process better, now that we kind of have the background of what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. To go further, we have what's called an optional clauses, and I would say 80% of our contracts come with a clause checked that says seller shall clean the interiors of any structures and remove all trash, debris, and rubbish from the property before buyer taking possession. And that's really a double check that says the seller's going to take those that stack of railroad ties that they had out behind the house, or the futon that they just finally broke down is not still going to be in the family room when the buyer moves in. So it's just part of those different things that happen along the way. The other thing that happens a lot of time is what I call too much paint. And so a lot of times people like to leave touch-up paint. Oh, these are the colors I painted the house. Well, the touch-up paint is great, but the quarter full 7 cans of 1030 motor oil that get lumped on that same shelf are not okay.
No.
And so it's an extra step. It's an extra trip. You have to go to a hazardous material place to get rid of that. But contractually, they're supposed to be taking care of that. We know this takes a lot of time. We know that moving takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about the top 5 or 6 things you can do to be prepared for this move so you meet the obligations of the contract and you don't have a buyer back out in the last couple days jeopardizing your entire move.
Right here on News Talk 870.
Welcome back to the Tri-Cities Real Estate Update. We've been talking about some local issues and things that we see happening. And kind of in a continuation of our how do we operate in this environment, we've been talking about moving. And it is just, we're all creatures of habit. We get used to our environment. We like where we live generally. And when you take, I'd say, an animal, i.e. a human, out of their normal environment and just put them in chaos as they're trying to move, it creates some stress. And so I've seen that firsthand the last month on top of the regular stresses that are in the world now, in the new world, I should say, the COVID world that we deal with. It's just another layer that people need to be aware of when they're moving and what you can do to make that move process go a little bit smoother. The first thing that we see a lot of is people not having enough boxes or tubs for your move. A lot of times people will use cardboard boxes. I'll tell you, it's interesting. A great way to source those for free is the recycling center. A lot of times you'll find a ton of those tossed out at the recycling center, especially with all of the Amazon orders and stuff that come in those boxes. So you can hang out at the recycling center for probably 25 minutes and get a ton of boxes.
I'm going to remember that for our son for college because
absolutely
we used to try to get those produce boxes at Winco. You could stop a tank with.
Yes, absolutely.
But they recycle them.
They recycle those. So a lot of times you either have to catch them at the right time or grab those from the recycling center. And I will tell you, most neighborhoods now operate a neighborhood webpage called Nextdoor. And Nextdoor, one of the most popular posts that we see on Nextdoor is moving boxes. I would say moving boxes, and it is a great resource if you are not signed up for moving boxes and lost pets. I tell you what, the Nextdoor community, if you want to see neighbors jump into action and get help people, it's a great thing. You can sign up for your local neighborhood. There's usually a moderator, but it's really nice if you have a lost pet and are looking for it. I don't know I've lost count of the number of times I've seen the neighbors rally and help people get reunited with their pets. Moving boxes are another great thing that goes on there. It's a great option. 3-4 years ago probably didn't even exist at the way it does now. So it's fun to see that come into play and really help with real estate. The next thing that I wrote down that I see people have a problem with in moving is lack of organizing where stuff goes at the new house. And you don't have to go buy like really expensive you can get crazy with this stuff if you look on Amazon, organization systems and spreadsheets. If you just go buy different colored Post-it notes, that's a great way to do it. And so, if you have, your son's room can be blue Post-it notes, your daughter's room can be green Post-it notes, the kitchen can be yellow. And so what you end up doing is as you box items up, you either use that colored marker or that colored Post-it note, and you just stick it on that box.
And put a little piece of tape over it so it doesn't come off.
Absolutely. And then the beauty of that is if you have friends and family helping at the new house that you're moving to, right before everybody gets there, you just go through the house and you put a blue Post-it note on your son's bedroom, the green one on your daughter's bedroom. And so that way people aren't having to ask you a million questions. Your help arrives, they grab boxes and they just start distributing those to the rooms via the color system. So it makes a huge difference there. Another thing that people will a lot of times use is reusable tubs. Talk to somebody that's moved recently or has the reusable tubs. For instance, we use that a lot. We do a lot of staging of our houses that are for sale. And I can't tell you how nice it is to have a supply of those reusable tubs that will unpack and then repack when we come back. So if you have a friend that has a supply of those, absolutely great way to do things there. The other thing that I wrote down that is huge is you can also take photos of what is being packed away. Because a lot of times you're going to be looking for that one or two things. You can number the box, take a photo of it, and then, I mean, with your iPhones now, it's just so quick and easy to be able to take those photos, quick photo of what's inside the box, then you have a corresponding number to that, and you're not having to root through 15 or 18 boxes on that day that you're looking for
to find the can opener, because all you have are canned goods to eat.
Absolutely, 100% the case. The other thing that we see happen all the time is that people are underestimating the time to pack. So in our world, we normally have a 30 to a 45 day closing window. And usually we can tell, for instance, what we talked about in the first segment of our show today is that a buyer can walk through a house 5 days prior to closing to make sure that the house is still in good condition, the property's been maintained, etc. I have been to some of those walkthroughs where there is 3 days left to go, and I leave the house telling our buyer, we have a massive problem. The seller forgot that they are moving in three days. And so, a lot of times, I mean, we can also tell when someone is preparing properly. And, I got to say, unless you have a ton of help like that, when you're in a 30-day move window, you almost have to start making plans and packing immediately in that first, if not second week, because it has a tendency to sneak up on people. And what happens in those situations is what we talked about in the first segment, is when they have not properly prepared and seen what that looks like, they're so destroyed those last 3 days, if they've saved it all for the last week, that they don't have time to properly plan, the cleaning crew to come through. And that's my next tip, is having a cleaning crew set up to come help you do that final clean. Most people, after they have spent the marathon of the last 3 to 4 days moving and packing and getting everything out of the house, the last thing that they want to be thinking about is properly cleaning the house as they leave. Number one, they probably packed away the cleaning supplies that they needed 4 or 5 days ago, and they're not able to get to it to have everything they need to have that done. So having a professional to help makes a huge, huge difference. Most of our clients end up hiring a professional moving company to come in that last week to get all of the big items, but the preparation for the drawers and the closets and the junk drawers and the garage cabinets and the tools, the preparation to get all that in place is going to take longer than most people think. I always tell, if you think it's going to take yourself a week before, double that and go to 2 weeks. And that's still a crazy, crazy short time frame. So that's a huge one. Another thing that we had a client do that I had never seen before, that I thought was just a great tip, was we had some clients come into town and they were moving cross country. So they had moved from Tennessee, I think it was, with this particular client. And to know when the moving truck got really close to the house, or when it was going to arrive, or where things were, they fully charged an iPad and packed it away in a box and put it on the moving truck. And so they could use Find My iPhone or Find My iPad to see exactly where their stuff was. So if you have I don't think the tile trackables can do it. But if you have something like an iPad that has that has a cell connection like that, like I just looked at this guy and I was like, man, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never seen that before. He's like, yeah, the truck just went by Ritzville, so if you could meet me at the house, I think it's going to be here. I was like, dude, you are awesome. like that is such a great idea. So,
well, most of us don't have access to transponders.
Yeah,
so.
right. I mean, it was just, I wrote it down because I was like, that is just super, super impressive. And then the last item that I wrote down that makes things easier is, if you have the option the night before to go by the house that you're purchasing or getting to and making sure, or if you've closed on it and the moving truck is coming in a day or two, is to make sure the moving truck has a parking spot.
Oh.
So, a lot of times the lots are smaller in some neighborhoods and the streets are busy. And sometimes, the neighbor across the street will park their car in front of your house. Well, that can really mess things up that day of moving.
I've debated painting the curb yellow in front of my house.
Yes, so you know what I'm talking about. So if you get a chance to either park one of your cars there that can kind of block it so you can move it when the moving truck gets there,
or put cones out,
it's a huge, huge help, and we do run into that more often than people think. So what's the saying? My kids have a saying in sports. I think it's like the 5 P's is proper previous planning prevents pitiful performance.
I got to remember that.
So I think that is the theme for moving, and it'll keep a lot of the stress away that last 4 or 5 days as you close out. So if you have any questions about any of these topics, you can go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. We would be glad to help. I just recently moved. Misery loves company. So there we go. It's a great reminder of how that happens. Also, if you have any questions about selling or buying, the market is still absolutely on fire right now. Feel free to go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message, and we would be glad to help with that real estate transaction. And we will be right back here next week.
Right here on News Talk 870.